Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is the Breaking Free Show, and my name is Marilyn Shannon, and I am so happy to be here with you today. Hope you're all doing well.
Microphone.
I hope you're doing well. Thank you, Amnan. And staying safe. I don't know what you heard, but my name is Marilyn Shannon. This is the Breaking Free Show. I hate that little blue thing there. Anyway, hope you're doing well. I'm glad you're here and joining us today. It's an honor to have you as always. And I know your time is so precious. And we are delighted that you have chosen to share your time with us. And I take it very seriously. So each and every week, we bring you a great topic, a wonderful idea, an inspiring guest who can share with you and just make such a difference in your life. And that's what we want each and every week. So let me remind you that you are more than welcome anytime during our conversation to call in. And you can do that at 919-518-9773. You can also join us in our chat and just put your name, nickname, whatever you like under our video, and you can ask questions and comment right there. And also, if the mood, just kind of gets you and you want to join us and you want to come in on Skype voice, you can. And that would be at computers, then the number 2K voice. Remember, that is voice, not video. So don't worry about how you look. Just come on in and share whatever's on your mind and in your heart. We'd love to have you. So I say hi to Amnon. How you doing?
Hello, Marion. Doing just fine.
Good.
It's getting kind of chilly out there.
Oh, yeah. Chilly, raining, all that kind of to the bone stuff, right?
It's about time, though.
Yeah. So now I want to introduce my guest to you, and I'm really excited to have her join us here for our conversation. She and I have been kind of tucked away a little bit. And before the show got launched, and I've been having just a lovely, sweet conversation with her. She's delightful. Beverly Jenkins, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So tell everyone who you are.
I'm Beverly Jenkins. I am a romance writer. I have 40 books in print. I do historicals mainly. My focus is 19th century African American life. I am NAACP Image Award nominee, 2017 Nora Roberts Lifetime Achievement Award from Romance Writers of America, oldest of 7. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, and 26 years of books. And now I'm here talking to Marilyn.
And I love talking about this stuff. Love it. So have you been writing historical romance novels from the beginning, or did you switch, or what's been your thing?
I started in 1994 with my very first book. I focused on the all-Black towns that were created in Kansas after the Great Exodus of 1879, which was the first exodus of African Americans out of the South. Not to be confused with the exodus of 1900 that took people north. This took people west. So they founded towns in Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa and Deerfield, Colorado, and some people went as far west as California, to escape the awfulness of what was in the South after Reconstruction. So we have a hunk of a buffalo soldier, and the book's called Night Song. That's the very first book. I have a hunk of a buffalo soldier, and I get to tell their history because, the 10th Cavalry was so important during our country's formation of the West. Our heroine is a school teacher. She's an Oberlin-educated school teacher. Oberlin was one of the few schools in America that allowed African Americans to matriculate out of, past high school. So I give you a bib list in the back of the book because I do history. I do love. I call it edutainment. It's entertainment and education. And people were very, very interested in the history that I present in my books. So, as I said, I put a bib list in the back, and if you want to do more delving into the topics, then you can do that.
So tell us what inspired you to begin.
I wasn't really writing for publication. I grew up reading everything. I used the Mark Twain Library on Gratiot and Burns in Detroit, and I read every book in that library, from the little kitty books to the teen books to the adult books. So reading was my thing. But what inspired me was that, I just wanted to write a story. Back then, like I said, Night Song was published in 94. I started writing just a story for me because the market was basically closed to African American mass market fiction in the early 80s, the 70s, and the 60s.
Okay, before you go, tell us what you mean by closed. I mean, I don't. I want us to talk about all this stuff. So
Okay.
as soon as you say something, everybody, as soon as you say something that I don't know about or I think you don't know about, I'm going to just interrupt her because we're talking to somebody who knows. So I want to know. So just tell me that.
Publishing didn't think Black people read. So you did not have very many African American writers writing what we call mass market fiction. And mass market fiction would be mysteries, it would be romance, it would be fantasy. So basically, the market was closed to African American writers.
Hold on a minute. So they didn't really know. They just made that judgment call. They didn't really know how the books would sell, would they?
No, they didn't know.
Okay.
They had no idea. No idea. I mean, and it was the tenors of the time. I mean, when my mom, who I think I got my reading gene from, I just lost her in April. She was 92 years old. When she was using the libraries in Detroit growing up, libraries were segregated. She could go in and read, but she could not take the books home. So rather than be deterred, and she was a pretty feisty lady, she just sat every Saturday and read. So that was, one of the, dumb things about, the country back then is the perception of who Black people were, what they were capable of doing. So publishing was no different than the rest of the country in that regard. So they didn't think Black people read. So they didn't publish very many Black authors. That changed, I think, with Terry McMillan, her Waiting to Exhale, when she was on the New York Times bestsellers list for like 1,000 weeks, thanks in part to Oprah. So publishers were like, oh, wow, yeah. I mean, I don't know what they thought we were doing in the bookstores. I mean, I've been in bookstores all my life. So, so to get back to me, I got enough rejections to paper my house and your house. And everybody
Rejections from who?
rejections from publishing when, I finally my girlfriend made me try and sell this book that I was writing at home for me because the market was closed. She's a Caucasian friend, and she'd just gotten a book published, a sweet romance. Now, sweet romance is no love scenes on the page. It's like a fade to black kind of thing behind closed doors kind of thing. So she'd written that and she'd got published. And I was working at the time at Park Davis Pharmaceuticals in their library. And we were celebrating her, and she wanted to see what I was writing on. And I brought it in, and she said, you need to get this published. And I'm like, where? Because like I said, the market was closed. I was just writing for me. So I tell her this is her fault that I am here, her fault and my mother's fault. So I eventually found an agent, and the rejections poured in.
Even after you've got an agent?
Yeah. I mean, having an agent doesn't guarantee publication.
Was it a Black agent or a white agent?
She's a Black agent, but she was also used to be one of the top editors in romance out of New York. She had gotten out of publishing, and she had a small agent agency. And but my problem was back to perceptions. they thought the writing was great. I mean, I got all these rejections that said, writing's great, writing's great. But the but was when publishing thought about a 19th century story featuring African Americans, their first thought was slavery. So here I am with a story about free Black people living in an all Black town on the plains of Kansas. And they were like, what? What are we going to do with this?
Let me just say something to you. There's, and we'll probably say this a lot, or I might say there doesn't seem to be much difference, because I picked up a book recently to listen to. It's called The Kitchen House. And it touches upon slavery a little bit, but I expected it to touch upon slavery even more, because it's all about, Black people. And my mind went to, oh, this is going to be all about slavery. Of course, it was, but that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Our history is a lot more, has a lot more depth and a lot more scope than just what, Hollywood feeds us, and what the little bit of history that we're taught in school. So they were very, very unfamiliar with the Exodus. They were unfamiliar with these towns. And so there was no box for it.
But how did you get into that part of literature? I mean, what drove you into, historical romance fiction?
I grew up with African American history in my home. I told people my mother was Black before it was fashionable. Okay. She always told us what great history. I'm the oldest of 7. And she always told us, and my dad too, that we were more than what was being shown. I worked right out of college for Michigan State University. I worked in their graduate library. I was the head clerk at their graduate library. And I was the head of all the kids that put all the books back, did all the shelving and all that. So it was a great time. But State also had a full set of the Journal of Negro History, which goes back to 1920s. So the university has a river that runs through it. It's called the Red Cedar River. And at lunchtime, I would take armfuls of these out to the river, eat my lunch, and just leaf through. Little did I know that, 30 years later, I would be using that history in my books, because I do the Black towns in Kansas. I write Black Westerns. I write Black period pieces on Reconstruction, and give you a great love story. Because if I had written a history book, probably nobody would have read it. But you give them a great story. You give them strong characters that they care about and root for. And you can tell history that way, in a very, very non-confrontational, there is no test on Friday kind of way.
Yeah, you make it easy for people to get the story that way, to understand the history that way. So who is your favorite author?
I have a few favorites. As we were talking in our little green room kind of session, I read fantasy. So one of my favorites right now is N.K. Jemisin, a Black woman out of New York, who has a trilogy called the Broken Earth Trilogy. She's the first woman of color, first author of color to win the Hugo. The Hugo is the sort of the Oscar for fantasy and science fiction. And she has won that 3 times with each book. So she's a ceiling breaker. I love her. I love Jim Butcher, who writes about Harry Dresden. Harry is the only wizard in Chicago in the phone book. And he has about, I don't know, maybe 15 books in the series. I love him. I love Alona Andrews. That's a husband and wife team. They write great fantasy. Patricia Briggs. So that's my fiction. I also read a lot of nonfiction to do the stories from my books. And some of my favorites are Art Burton, who's out of Chicago, who's an expert on the Black West. Benjamin Quarles, who has written about Blacks during the Revolutionary War, Black abolitionists, Blacks during Reconstruction.
So let me ask you this. So first of all, do you prefer to be referred to as a Black woman or a woman of color?
I'm Black. I'm a Black woman.
So that's okay. Not just a woman. You can be either one, right?
I can be either one.
Okay. And what happened to you? How has writing these books indentured your life? What has happened to you along the way?
I've got to see the country. I've got a chance to meet people of all walks of life. To know how valuable my readers are to me as a person. I appreciate them dearly. It's put me in touch with librarians, historians, booksellers, and I'm grateful for all of them because, I never met a stranger, and you can always learn something from everybody that you meet. So I'm having a ball doing this. I've been at this for 26 years. I am having an absolute ball.
What about your stories? How have they progressed? Are they, deeper, similar? I mean, are they going down a different path of story?
Try and write, ideally, you try and write a different story with each book. You try not to phone it in. You have some authors out there who all they do is change the names of the characters. They get the same book every time. Try and give them a different flavor, which helps me because I've done 19th century stories. I've done 18th century stories. Before we moved over to the 21st century, historicals in romance, you couldn't go past 1900. Historicals were everything from 1899 back.
Why was that?
Because that was the quote unquote standard.
Well, we don't like standards, do we?
No, we don't.
We're going to make our own standard. I don't even know what you're talking about.
So it wasn't considered a historical if it was, if you had 19 in front of the date. So now that we've gone into the 21st century, we can now move forward into the 19th century. So I'd like to do some stories, maybe in the 1920s, some of the gentleman gangsters of Harlem and Detroit and Chicago, and give you a good love story and give you a good history lesson in that too.
What is something that you've uncovered? You mentioned this gentleman in Chicago who's an expert.
Yeah.
But what have you uncovered in your research?
I stand on the shoulders of the people who are doing the actual history. I call myself a kitchen table historian. I set all the books out on my kitchen table and I take the great scholarship that the people are a lot more adept at doing than I am, and I'm weaving what they have discovered, into my stories. And through them, I've discovered men like Bass Reeves, who Deputy Marshal, Indian Territory, one of the few Black marshals of his day, appointed by hanging Judge Isaac Parker out of Fort, my brain is so sleepy, out of Arkansas, Fort Smith, Arkansas. And they think, some historians believe that the Lone Ranger is based on Bass Reeves. And this is why. A lot of the convicts that were coming out of Oklahoma Territory went to Michigan. That's where the penitentiary was for that area. And they would tell stories about this great African American deputy. And he would trick people, and he never lost a man, and he would do disguises. And, the Lone Ranger started in Detroit on the radio. So they think that these stories sort of filtered down. Of course, he couldn't be black and on the radio in the 1940s. So they changed him into a white guy and turned him into the Lone Ranger. If you want to read more about Bass Reeves, you can get Art Burton's book. It's called Black, Red, and Deadly by Art T. Burton. He talks about Sonny Six Killer, who was one of the deputies. This was Cherokee, all the black and brown outlaws that were in. That's why I write. I loved Westerns. My grandfather, grew up, you go to your grandparents' house on the weekend and we want to watch the scary movies. And he's like, no, we're watching John Wayne. So, I've seen probably every John Wayne movie that was ever made. So I have a love for history, a love for historicals and Westerns. So I write Westerns too. So I have a couple, 3 or 4 books that are set in Indian Territory. So I'm learning all kinds of stuff and educating my readership along with myself.
And how much of your story do you kind of, you're writing the story, so you get to decide what you want it to sound like or say. So have you had to watch yourself in writing these? Have you had to correct yourself in your own personal views because of something?
I think I'm just amazed at what I didn't know.
As a Black woman.
As an American.
As an American. That's a sad fact. That's a sad fact.
Yeah. That, in the Native American history, I try and okay, I look at United States history as a quilt. And a lot of the pieces have been torn out, cut out, ripped out. And most of these pieces are tied to people of color in this country. So you have very little information about Native Americans other than they were quote unquote savages and we put them on the reservation. Very few people know about Oklahoma being Sequoia. And Sequoia was a Native American state. Native Americans wanted Oklahoma to be a state called Sequoia, their own little country. In fact, the state of Oklahoma used their constitution. Very few people know about the Chinese. Very few people know about the Mexican Americans. So, you give that history and you educate people and they educate their kids and they educate sometimes their teachers. So that's what it seems to be my mission, is to spread all this great history, give you a great love story. And at the end of the day, you learn something and you're fanning from the love scenes and,
So anything go with your love scenes?
I try and be very tasteful. Everything is within context. So it's not, what word am I looking for? It's not garish.
It's not trashy just to be trashy.
Yeah. And I think that's what some people have the idea of what romance is like. And it's not. Some great stories out of romance. We love our families, we love our pets, we love our kids. But the only time we get, people laughing behind their hands is when we're talking about love between two people. Um, a lot of people deal with romance like they're 12 years old, and in middle school. The he, they're having sex. Yes, we all do.
Well, I would say that the more you write, or anybody writes about something particular that helps rid us of judgment, stigma, and all of that stuff, the better we are. The better the more you can commercialize romance
Yeah.
for romance sake, for
Yeah.
the beauty of it, the better we're all going to be in accepting, romance as being, good and part of life and healthy.
And I feel that way about history too, because the more we know about each other, the better off we as a country and we as people will be. We all share the same values. We all love our kids. We all want good schools. We all want safe communities. So,
Of the stories that you have written, what is your favorite story?
oh my, it's like trying to asking a mom to pick her favorite child,
I've
right?
heard that before. I've heard that so many times. Yeah, I know that's not a fair question.
Well, it isn't, but it makes you think. You should go back through the titles and you try and um,
Or maybe the better question is not which is your favorite, but which story turned out, was a shocker to you. Because I'm imagining and when an author like you is writing a story, it's not all developed, right? The characters are they all developed before you write it? No, they kind of take on and they grow, and you see things in a certain way. You kind of be part of the story, right? The narrator of the story, or the narrator of the narrator. So, of your stories, which one took on something that was, happy for you, shocking for you?
I think the Blessing series um, has been the most surprising and maybe the most fulfilling because of its subject matter. Um, and as for characters, there are two kinds of writers, as we say in romance. There are plotters, people who, plot the story. They know everything that's going to happen from that first letter that they put on the screen till the D and the end. And then there are pantsers, those of us who write by the seat of the pants, and we have no idea what's going to happen. And we don't do a whole lot of plotting. We sort of let the characters write the story. I'm a pantser. My book, The Blessing series, started with just a woman who came to me. My characters come to my head. Fiction writers are kind of strange. We get these visits from characters and we have no idea who they are, what stories they're going to be in. And I had this very, very rich woman, had no idea who she was going to be, put her in a drawer. And I don't know, 20 years later, I figured that she was going to buy the town that I created from my first book, because over time, like most small towns, they'd gone broke, no infrastructure, nobody there but senior citizens. And so they sold themselves on eBay to try and preserve the history. They wanted somebody to buy the town that was going to preserve the history. So she gets this huge divorce settlement. She goes to see her husband on her 50th birthday, and there he is doing the horizontal tango with his secretary on his desk. And he's a vice president of an oil company, so he's got, Midas-like money. So she comes out of the settlement with, gobs of money. And instead of buying, handbags and shoes like I probably would have done, she buys this town. So the story encompasses her building this town, and she used to be a social worker. So she brings in these at-risk kids to be raised old school by foster parents and by the senior citizens in this town. This book took off. It basically wrote itself. And now I'm on book 11 of the series. I've had letters from foster parents. They send me pictures of their kids. I've had teenagers write me who've read the story because they connected with the kids in the stories. I'm an adopted parent, so it pulls at a little piece of my heart. So this series, very, very unlike my romance in the sense of what it covers and the themes, has been very, very surprising and very rewarding. Very rewarding.
So do you have any of your books handy that you can just hold up and show us?
I don't have them. I can run and get them at the end if you'd like.
Okay, sure. We'd love to have you hold them up and show it to us.
Okay.
So it sounds like a great story, and it led me to my next question. Besides being a by the pants kind of lady, what is your greatest gift as an author? Is it your way of researching? Is it the way you tell a story? Is it the way I'm always fascinated by authors and how they describe things that are just so crazy in their description that it makes sense. What's your greatest attribute as an author?
I think that's a question for the readers, right? But they tell me I write very visual, that you can actually see it in their head as it's playing out. I'm very proud of the history that I present. I like to think that I write compelling characters, as I said earlier, that you can root for and that you can connect with. I'm also proud of the fact that the Black men in my stories are heroes. We don't get a lot of that in American culture. These men have put their lives on the line for this country, from the French and Indian Wars to Afghanistan and Iraq. The Buffalo Soldiers were the only law west of the Mississippi, and they patrolled from the Rio Grande to the Canadian border and were the law in a lot of places where there was no law. And yet when we see the men of my race on TV, they're deadbeat dads, they're, drug dealers, they're, everything except heroes. So I make a conscious effort to make sure that they are given, as the kids say, given their roses, because they've earned it. So for me, that's one of the strengths of my books.
I'm really happy you just said what you said about Black men, because my next book is In Just One Afternoon, Listening to the Hearts of Black Fathers. And this book, I interviewed these men way before what's happened recently with, Mr. Floyd and all of the things that were occurring. I mean, this was probably started 2 years ago. Not that things weren't happening then. They were. But not the way they were coming to me, not the way I was getting them, not the way this country was receiving them, hopefully, in some ways, just couple of years ago. And I always want to dispel a myth, and I always want to squish a stigma and show people how they really are. So I interviewed all these fathers, these Black men. And one of the fathers that I interviewed works at a university. He runs the barbershop school in one of the local universities. And I said to him one day, he was telling me all about his 13-year-old son. And he said to me I said to him, "How do you know so much about your son?" And he turns around and he says to me, "I'm in his business." And I'm like, wow. That was so chilling to me that, each book that I do, when it comes to the table of contents or identifying each of the stories, I try to come up with something that's creative. in identifying the stories. And so for the Black fathers, I decided that I was going to take one of their quotes, one of their phrases out of each of the chapters to identify each of the, and I was going to do, this one was going to be, I'm in his business. And that couldn't have been more perfect. And the Black fathers that I have interviewed have been remarkable. I mean, with their struggles and how they give back. And I am just so, you know, I want to give them a voice. So you just inspired me even more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't see the Black fathers who are volunteering at the schools. You don't see the Black fathers who are, you know, reading the gospel at church. You don't see the Black fathers who are cutting their grass every Saturday, you know, or, you know, my daughter's first date was with her dad. It's at the daddy daughter dance, you know, and she had a beautiful gown, and, you know, he was in his, you know, his suits. And it was funny because my kids are raised in a majority white community, and I was a brownie leader. And so most of the kids knew me, and they knew my husband. I lost him in '03 to cancer. But as the kids grew up, they always saw my daughter and my son's dad. So recently, my daughter said that one of her white friends thought that all Black men wore suits all the time, because every time she saw my daughter's dad, he had a suit on, because that's what he did. He's a contract negotiator for the teachers union. So, you know, I had to chuckle, you know, hearing that, and then thinking about how they're portrayed on TV in an entirely, you know, disrespectful kind of manner. So, yeah.
So did you pick your storyline based on wanting to show Black men in a good light?
That wasn't, for me, that wasn't, it was a no-brainer. And it wasn't anything that I had to consciously do, because of the Black men who've been in my life all my life. So romance probably is one of the only fiction genres where you get constant, positive African-American male images. But it wasn't anything conscious. It was just because that's the way it is, for me. And for most of the women that I know, and for when I grew up, my uncles, my mom had 3 brothers. They were always great guys, great uncles, great husbands, great fathers. So it wasn't anything that I had to create, because it was already created, if that makes sense.
So are you rewriting some history, or are you telling it?
I don't have to rewrite it. It stands on its own. Whether I'm talking about the Black soldiers who were buried alive at Fort Pillow, or whether I'm talking about the Chinese in Wyoming who were doing a lot of the mining, whether I'm talking about Harriet Tubman's spy group. I mean, we see Harriet Tubman, and, you know, we think all she did was, you know, she, you know, stole these slaves, and, you know, they went north and all that. Harriet Tubman was a whole lot of woman. I mean, she spied for the U.S. government, one of the first and only women to get a pension from the government for her contributions for the Civil War. So I'm taking little known pieces of history that historians have documented and putting them in my stories and teaching and educating, and, as I said, edutainment, and proud of what I do.
Well, thank you for doing it.
You're welcome.
So hold on one second. So Amnon, you have my books handy at this moment? I will show my books that are all on Amazon. So the first one, In Just One Afternoon, Listening to Hearts of the Men. Wonderful stories about all kinds of men doing all kinds of things and how they open up about life. spirituality, parenting, what it was like in prison, what they learned, why they went to prison. Just good men, good stories. The next one, twins, in just one afternoon, listening to the hearts of twins. Twins are role models for relationship, whether it's sibling rivalry, parenting, just conflict resolution. They have so much to teach us on how they get along, how they make themselves get along. And then millennials are just interesting. They they're just wonderful too. I mean, they're all wonderful. When you listen into the heart of a human being and you get to their truth, not necessarily a made up truth, but their soul truth, you really get an idea of who they are. Then people impacted by opioid addiction on both sides of addiction, whether it's someone who is in recovery, struggling, a family member. It's amazing the stories that they will tell that educate us as to who that addict is and who they're not. And next on my agenda, excuse me, is in just one afternoon, listening into the hearts of Black fathers. So all of the 4 are on Amazon and available in print or ebook. And I am working on Black Father's book, which I'm really excited about now. So if you have any questions about the books, or you have a good book title for me or subject, or you are a subject, a great story of whatever, in listening into the hearts of can be anybody. And the more we share who we are, the more I help share who everyone is to the best of my ability, the more understanding we will have for each other. So please reach out to me anytime at Marilyn, MARIOYN, at MarilynShannon.com. Okay, I'd love to see some of your books. If you don't have them real handy, we will certainly continue to show them at some point.
Well, maybe I can pull them up. Can I show you Amazon?
Mm-hmm.
All my stuff's on Amazon.
Okay, Amazon. And then so tell us where we find your books, Amazon, your website, all of that good stuff.
Okay, the website is beverlyjenkins.net. And there is a link there if you want to send me an email. You can get my books on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, iBooks, Kobo. You can get my books through independent. There's a lot of indie bookstores that have come to the fore in the last year or so. You can get my books through them. I'm everywhere. You can get them in audio. You can get them in hardcover. You can get them. We have editions, of course, for the blind. So no matter how you like to read, I have something for you.
So tell, for somebody who is writing now, what is your words of wisdom for an author, a new author or somebody who's been self-publishing, whatever? What is your words of wisdom as a seasoned author?
For all the aspiring writers, finish the book. You're so busy out talking about, I'm gonna finish the book. And do not send that first draft to anyone. First drafts are terrible. Everyone's first draft is terrible. And in this age of shrinking publishers, when I started in 94, there were probably, maybe 25 publishers in the United States. There are now 4. So a lot of people are self-publishing. So as new authors, it is up to you to find out as much as you can and learn as much as you can about the business of writing. How do you query? Who do you query? How do you find an agent? And you don't need an agent until after you finish your book, because they don't want to have to sell just a chapter. They want to be able to see all that you've created. A good site for aspiring writers is janefriedman.com. Jane Friedman used to be a big time editor in New York. She had a couple of her own imprints, and she's retired. And she sort of has made it her mission to help which is wonderful. Writers, especially young writers. So if you got questions about this or that, excuse me, go to janefriedman.com. Ooh, excuse me. Go to Jane Friedman, especially if you're self-published, and I'm sure you will find answers to your questions. It's a great time to be creative, I think. People are looking for good reads to help them get through this quarantine. More people are reading, I think, right now than ever. And don't take yourself seriously. Writing should be fun. So those are my, top, 5, 6.
Well, it's good advice.
Yeah.
And people just get done and not get discouraged by anybody telling you not to.
Yeah, don't let anybody step on your dream.
I had the pleasure of meeting who's a friend, a New York Times bestselling author, and she's up there. She's written 30 some odd books, and she's been very sweet to me in guiding me and suggesting things. And excuse me, and I was at a book thing with her, but way before the excuse me, way before the pandemic. And she said that it took her to her third book to actually recognize that she had a voice and that she liked her voice. And it was very telling to me, because at the time I had just finished and had published my millennial book, which was my third book. And it was the same for me. I felt the same thing, that I could actually be excited by some of the things that I was saying. So it does take a while. Would you say that for yourself?
Yeah, I'm still surprised that my books are being read, because you have some authors who think the world revolves around them and that what they're writing is gold, and and I should be at the top of the. But I think most of us are very, very humble and very, very grateful for every book that we sell. But I'm still freaked out. I'm as pleased and surprised with my 47th book as I was with the first one, which I think is a good thing. But you have a lot of writers out there who have imposter syndrome, who feel that they don't deserve to be who they are. And, and I do my best to try and dispel that for them, because, you have a gift. This is a gift. Some people are gifted with singing. Some people are gifted with art. Some people are gifted with cooking. Some people are gifted with parenting. You're gifted with taking the 26 letters of the alphabet and able to spin it in ways that move people and change lives. So you're good at this. Don't let anybody tell you that you aren't.
How long does it take you to write a book?
I do 2 books a year, so should be 6 months. But I'm always behind. I'm behind right now. I loved it when we were only doing 1 book a year. Then you could, you could spend a whole lot more time being distracted, and then getting the work done. But with the internet, with the indie publishing and folks publishing, 3, 4, 5 books a year and all of that, it's made the rest of us have to produce more. So I'm doing 2 books a year, 1 historical, 1 women's fiction with the Blessing series. I'm having a good time.
What's your favorite part of writing your books? Is it the creating the story? Is it the the research? What is your favorite part?
I think I like all of it. I really love being able to write the end and then hitting send. That I think that might be my favorite part. Um, right now I'm on deadline. I'm not getting any sleep. I'm operating right now on 3 hours of sleep. Books due 1st of January. But you get to the point where you love this too. You love the sleep, deprivation. You love, not eating. You love not showering um, as you create. Um, there's nothing that I don't love about what I do. Um,
And I would say that's what makes you so good at what you do. That you don't get stuck on one thing, and and that you just, and after all these years,
yeah.
I mean, how many people can say that about the things that they do? And creative things, because creative things, I mean, do you get, writer's block?
I don't get blocked because I don't believe in it. And if you don't believe in something, then, you can't catch it, unless it's COVID. Um, but I don't believe in block. I get to the point sometimes in stories where I don't know where I'm going to go. But usually if I quiet my mind, or, a lot of stuff comes to me in the shower, or if I'm on my knees in the garden putting in bulbs, and your brain's clear. I did an interview recently, um, and I told the interviewer, I said, I have this vision of my character sitting in a corner laughing at me because they know the story and I don't. And they will feed me little pieces, every now and then. Here, we'll give her this part. We won't give her this. We'll give her this. But that's part of being a pantser too. So, but
And a really good listener.
yeah, oh yeah, you got to listen.
Gotta listen, man. That is the thing. Gotta listen.
Yeah, you have to.
So I was going to ask you, in going forward, like you're finishing one book now, do you take a break or do you just go right into the next one?
I usually take a break, depending on, how far behind I am. Um, I like to, because I don't get to read I'm a voracious reader. At least I used to be. You don't get to read as much as you want. So I'll take maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks off, try and catch up on my reading. Um, and
How does reading help you?
reading, it's not a help, it's self-care. I love to read. I've been reading since I was little. And that's one of the things that you have to sort of set aside when you're writing, because number one, if you're writing historicals, reading contemporaries will sometimes mess with your voice because it's a different vocabulary, it's a different rhythm, that kind of thing. But I love to read, so I try and catch up on all of the to be reads that I have in my Kindle. But usually after about a week, the muse is tapping me on the shoulder, saying, you want to get back to work, you want to get back to work, you want to get back to work. And I'm like, well, can you sit down and let me catch my breath a little bit longer?
So I guess, and I can keep on talking to you because I love what you do and you're so good at explaining it. How does, our current events influence your choice for the historical novel, or influence you in, like, I got to just keep writing. I got to keep writing?
So both. In the sense that what we're going through now is sort of the same thing we went through after the Civil War, with all of the chaos and the craziness and the shouting and screaming and all of that. And writing is the only thing I can control. I can't control what's going on out in the world, but it has an effect in my writing because I'm creating worlds that I can control. And that gives me a little bit of, that's my salvation, I guess. Because you can get really, really hung up in this and be, doom scrolling through Twitter and looking at all the awful stuff. But I can sit down and write, and I can create stories that have great people in them. Yes, there are conflicts, but it's what I can control, and I can't control what's going on outside my window.
And you can make a difference.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You can write a story that will give someone hope or give
Pause.
yeah,
Right.
for pause, or a story that they could share with their mom or sisters, or some of my readers, especially during the first part of my career, would use my books as cuddle time, with them and their husbands at night. He'd read a chapter, she'd read a chapter, they read a chapter each other, bringing people closer together. So, art has a function that I think is very, very valuable in society. So,
And say what it is. Say what it is. What's your way of describing that?
I think art offers hope. It offers distraction. It offers comfort, depending on the medium and what you're looking at. Um, it offers uh, fun. It offers heart stuff that affects your heart, not physically, but your soul heart.
And that does affect you physically.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, they say that the more you smile, the healthier you can be. So art is very, very important, and I think it's one of the downsides of where we are with our educational system is that arts is the first thing that's cut. We you don't have music classes like we had growing up, and Mr. Kilpatrick, who was our art teacher in elementary school. I mean, you don't get that much these days because that's the first thing that's cut. And there's so many creative kids out there who need that outlet. So
Right. It really does expand us.
it does. It
I mean, it
does.
really does get to see things in different ways and open up. One of the books I recently read was The Midnight Library. It was very interesting. And this woman was, loved philosophy and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, philosophy? I'm going to go look into some philosophy. And I downloaded an app. And
Yeah.
now I'm reading philosophy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, from a novel, from a nonfiction book,
Yeah.
got me to be interested in philosophy, because within fiction, and this is for everybody, this is just my take, within fiction and with a lot of fiction, not maybe all of it, but there's truth in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in fiction.
Yeah.
Historical truth, truth about philosophers, truth about relationships. There's truth. And when you listen into these books, you hear that truth, or the truth you can, you're ready for.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
So we have just a moment or two. So in our last moment, what wisdom would you like to share? Final words of wisdom.
Love yourself. Hug those you love. Tomorrow's not promised. Try and be a better person today than you were yesterday. Try and make the path wider for kids. And the best gift you can give a child is a library card. They're free. They can take kids all over the world, especially kids who are marginalized and pinched by poverty, like I was growing up.
Yep. Well, I thank you, Beverly. You have been a most wonderful guest. And I would love you to keep us on your top 10 list of where you want to come back. Okay. And share more wisdom, more books, more ahas, more everything. Okay.
You're very, very welcome. Have me back after I get some sleep.
Okay. Sounds perfect to me. And so everybody out there, thank you so much for being here today. We love you. We look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you for being here and listening to Beverly. She's amazing. And pick up her books and I will see you soon. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.